Yes, my name is Phil Ryan from Toyota. And Bruce, you had talked about this kind of follow the consumer for innovation and how we kind of question the what the consumer can do outside the workplace versus in the workplace. And I guess part of my take on that is the consumer market enjoys like constant perpetual innovation and entrepreneurship that helps to make these type of things readily available. And I was curious if anybody have any strategies or guidelines on how to bring that type of innovation mindset into the workplace to help kind of enjoy that same type of benefit.
Don't have a pat answer to that.
Bruce, can you just hold that a little closer?
Okay. No, I don't have a pat answer to that because it is difficult in a large regulated organization. We have certain constraints we have to operate within. How we've, at least at the facility where I'm working, how we've kind of broken through that is this. By the architecture we've put in place, I can, without changing the source systems or without, massive change, all I'm doing is taking existing information and putting it into a new paradigm for those users. So I'm creating a new user experience without having to alter anything underneath. So we work very closely. We have what we call the production excellence team, which is our represented employees, and we work very closely with them and use them as a guiding force. What do you need? What's important to you? What do you wish you had? And then using the mobile technology to present that without any fundamental, rip and replace requirements underneath. So that's kind of what I refer to as the elegance of the architected solution by creating the visualization layer on top of the existing infrastructure. So for the power users who are down deep into those applications and doing the real engineering work, their life is the same. But for the user community to mine that information in new and creative ways, by putting that layer on, that's how we address it.
And if I can just pick up where Bruce left off, very similar to that approach, as a matter of fact. When we were talking to our users and we were building some of our mobile strategies, two things were apparent. The first one was, for a lot of our users, and this is going to fly a little bit different to your original supposition that HMIs as is are not mobile. What we heard from a lot of our users is we had some difficulty just getting them to accept the concept of mobility. And when you finally got them over that piece, their immediate piece is, I'm going to have to learn something new. So the initial tactic we took was, well, what if you didn't have to learn anything new? What if you could keep the paradigm exactly as it is, and you can just use it in a new way? And I'll tell you, when we launched that app, we got tremendous feedback. And what that did for us is it gave us a leg to then innovate in areas that typically are resistant to innovation. So then we built a new mobile app that is layered on top of that one, which play into pretty much all of the concepts you put on the board, allow the existing systems to stay as is, provide the capability to create new context, leverage roles and relationships, move this from a polling type environment where you're looking at the HMI to determine what's important versus what's not important to an exception-based environment where I'm pushing you the information that you need, when you need it. Leveraging geolocation potentially, so that basically, now again, from an innovation perspective, if I'm walking toward a device, I'm close to the device, why not just push me the information that I'm near? So it was an interesting evolution that we took. And I guess the takeaway there is, in some cases, even if you start small, by just bringing in the mobile capability and providing some way to create new insights for your users or your operators, it opens up all new possibilities for you to evolve even further.
Maybe I can also add here a little bit. I see also a huge gap now between the consumer and the industrial applications, and this gap is becoming bigger and bigger. The devices we are using for mobile support of our maintenance workers, they are a couple of years old, and they need to be enhanced for the use in the plants, explosion protection, and all this stuff. And you always have small number of devices you need. So there's no big business out there compared with the millions of smartphones you have per day or week or whatever. So it is very difficult to get those industrial-ready devices, and the gap is becoming bigger and bigger. And I have no answer how we can catch up with the innovation outside. And it's very difficult, and I think the push from the consumer market is very high, but we cannot really catch up with it.
Yeah, so we work with many of our clients in doing exactly what you ask, is how do you stay ahead of the curve, so to speak, right? So there's two different aspects. On the consumer side, we do quarterly collaboration meetings. There's two kind of directions. One is from our clients. It's tell us what you think you need to do to evolve your platform or your solution. From our side, it's what's the emerging technology that needs to be considered in the next round. So every quarter you're looking at what's next and what's next and what's next, and that way you stay relevant, right? On the business side, quarterly's too often. On the business side, it's about every 6 months, because there's not that many changes in the core technology, but it gives the enterprise a chance to actually do their business while they ask for feedback on how do we enhance, improve, and add to the solutions that we're deploying inside the organization, right? What are the wish lists? And then as we come in and sit down with the other stakeholders and partners that we work with to provide these solutions on a 6-month basis, it's what is the emerging technology that needs to be put into the next cycle of innovation, and then put it out into the user groups and the stakeholders to say, how would that impact your applications, and how could it be implemented within your app structure to make sure that it's relevant, or is it a waste of time? Is there no use case around this type of technology? And I'll give you 2 examples. Big thoughts around mobile wallet right now, right? On the consumer side, everyone wants to know, is mobile wallet going to replace everything I have in my back pocket? And the answer is absolutely yes, it will. It's just a matter of time and how you do it and which partner you end up going with. The other is near-field communications. Every handset is going to have an NFC chip in it. So you might think, well, that's not really a business application. I completely disagree. As you build it into your app model and you start putting NFC readers out on all your big pieces of equipment, you can go up and do a service ticket swiping your smart device, and boom, it brings up the entire history of that device, instructions on how to remedy issues with it, and you can open and close tickets just on proximity, right? So these are things that are emerging that haven't caught mainstream but need to be thought in the process. And if you're not looking at this in a very structured 6-month, and I mean you have to have your collaboration meetings for a full day once every 6 months, you can't let it go, you won't stay ahead. You'll fall behind, and the cycle gets faster and faster in many respects. So you can't take 6 months or a year to vet things out and see if they're going to work in your organization. It is very much the 6 weeks to deploy and test it, and otherwise you're going to be testing devices that are obsolete, right? It's a challenge.
And just one final thing there, because you brought up a point about looking a little bit outward, and as a supplier, we have a pretty extensive ecosystem out there, and we rely very heavily on that ecosystem to collect VOC on a daily basis, right, from consumers, and they help us, right, tune into what is going to be most important so that we're innovating in the right way. And then, in fact, we have some members of our ecosystem today that are building capability that literally are leveraged within the application we have. And that's part of the magic, right, of mobile as well. Right? It provides frameworks that are easily extensible and then very easy to update. And especially if you have an ecosystem out there, right, they really can help make sure that you're evolving and innovating in the right way.
Okay, thanks. That was really a great question, because it touched on a lot of interesting ideas. And I'm just struck about how far this conversation has come from last year when we had sessions like this. We were kind of thinking about mobile to, wow, how do we keep up with all this stuff? Because that's really where it's at. Okay, who's got the next question in the audience? Right here. The mic's coming.
Yeah, I'm Mark Spindler with the Lakeland Companies, and I want to talk a little bit about the work-life balance and just kind of ask the panel how that can be dealt with. I know within our organization, as recent as 5 years ago, an employee was terminated because he was using Facebook too much. All right. Well, now here within the last several months, I'm aware of one of our software developers solving a problem by using Facebook, right? Collaborating with their peers. And then we start putting these mobile apps, right, in people's hands, and we expect them to respond no matter where they are. So they may be, they may be on vacation perhaps and expect a response. On the flip side then, isn't it only realistic that we should expect in the workplace for them to be able to maybe do some of their personal stuff as well? But how do you balance all that out?
Who wants to take that?
Clearly no real good answer to that. Right. But, I think you do bring up a couple of good points, right? One is where we, as a business used to follow same suit, right? Things like, social collaboration, going up and, checking the scores from last night and whatnot, we're frowned upon. But right now, I won't say they're encouraged, but they're allowed, within the framework of compliance and the fact that, you're going to be doing things in a proper way, because that allows, right, new insights to innovate. And to your point, if we're going to ask people to pretty much be available whenever and wherever they are, we do think that that's a fair ask. I do think the other piece of it, though, does start from the leadership side and just making sure that we're setting the right and proper tone. Because I'll tell you myself, right, here's what I learned. I learned that when I got emails off hours from my employees, I responded immediately, right, regardless of what time it was. And what that created in some cases is a culture where my employees now felt guilty if they didn't return same. So, part of what I try to do, especially if it's the employee community that we're talking about, is to try to follow suit, to try to demonstrate that there are lines that we try to draw. And, I'll talk to you tomorrow. And hopefully over time, right, that'll set some new norms, right, in terms of how to work in this world.
I'm not going to admit that I'm the best example of work-life balance, but I'll offer my thoughts on it in any case. Many of us here are operations manufacturing. We may have businesses running 24/7, and certainly a lot of companies here that are pretty good at getting the most out of their employees. But you raise a good point. If employees are expected to be on call all the time, then certainly you should allow some of that freedom during the job if they do need to respond to personally or something like that. But what I do with my team is set the expectation on here's the job that needs to get done and here's when it needs to get done. And you have the flexibility to, if you need to go to your kid's soccer game or if you need to do this, that's fine. Let me know ahead of time if something's coming up and set that flexibility. I believe that interacting on all the social media that's more prevalent these days really helps innovate faster. And as you're saying, solving problems through Facebook or other types of areas, and networking is an important part, and we should encourage that in a productive way and certainly not squash it. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, so, I think from a technology provider side, as a company, we're very good at getting immersed in the business and just responding until 10:30, 11 at night. But the reality is AT&T is very much about work-life balance. So we've got as many employees that are union that are not allowed to respond to anything if they're off the clock. And so we've actually internally developed curriculum to teach leaders how to coach their people about work-life balance, right? And it's kind of a unique approach. If you add on top of that technology enablers, and it can be as simple as you build mobile applications, understanding time zones and core working hours, and if somebody tries to access a corporate application, have a pop-up say, it's after hours, are you sure you want to proceed? Remind them that they're on their personal time and things like that. It's just kind of deriving, so it's like back in the 80s and 90s when we did all these time management trainings, it's going back and doing that again, but with technology in mind, and you will find there's a lot of professional training organizations that talk about how to separate the work-life balance in a technology-laden world, right? And that's become a very big business for a lot of training companies. We have it internally at AT&T.
Okay, good. So we're just about out of time, but we can take one more question if somebody's got one. Here we are.
Thank you. So my question to the panel in general, really, but kind of came from the GE presentation as well as the Suncor in general. Of course, it's for everybody, but the idea about analytics fascinates me a lot, and the where. For example, if we take the GE example, where do you perform the analytics? Do you do it per plant? Do you push the data back somewhere to your corporate headquarters and perform it, or to your data center somewhere perform it and then push the data back to your mobile device? Does it happen locally? Is there some micro-analytic type engine? Where do they reside, the engines? How do you get the data to the engines, and how do you push it back to the mobile device? Number one. Number two question is from the one of the presentations talked about a controlling from the mobile device. That thought scares me. I'm not very industrial-minded yet, but having the controls on a device and going back to the accessibility and having no dead zones and all that. So how could you manage that, having controller, one thing to see the data on a mobile device, but to actually control boilers and pumps and all that from a device, that's something I'd like to hear more about. Thank you. So 2 questions.
So towards the first one on where do you do the analytics, and that's for us been here's how you design your information systems, right? And some analytics are things like very simple calculations. Others are multivariate random forest, 10,000 by 10,000 variable matrices.
Just hold the mic up.
Or it could take several days to run, right? So for some of those, we'll put into our high performance computing cluster. We have some of those assets available for the really big data, big analytics types of things. For the more common use cases, they're a couple of hours or so. We'll have a set of servers on site that do that, and we use our mobile devices just as a display. And then some of the more simple, spin some data around, ask some simple single-variate questions you can actually do right on the device. But I would answer that more as what's the problem you're trying to solve, and then find the right computing solution to do that. And again, we use all 3 for what we're doing. Toward the control of devices and things like that remotely. So that's something that clearly you want to be careful about. There were some good sessions on the first day. The way we implement some of that is we're 99.9% read-only. There are 2 people that we allow write access to, but we also have the physical keys on site where there has to be someone physically at the place that can say, okay, now put this into a write mode such that the expert off-site can make some changes. So there needs to be someone on site either with the key or flipping the switch to allow that write to happen.
So a couple things on the, we'll take the security one first. Part of the discussions that we've had with a lot of customers, right, very similar to what Randy found, is a lot of our customers say visibility is enough from a mobile perspective, right? I get a ton of flexibility, and we're going to go with that. Others are actually very open to allow control. I mean, there's a couple of customers who literally, I'll just say, have no concerns. They have field people, and they have control, and the responsibilities in the field person's hands. But I will tell you, where we have heard of some opportunities, and this is what we're working on right now, is give me the ability to leverage the technology in the mobile device to help make the decisions. So as an example, right, if I know who is logged in, I know who has the authority to even do writes, and depending on their proximity to the actual piece of equipment, which we can measure, right, allow writes or not shut down, or shut down writes. So if they're within 5 miles, obviously read only. If they're within 10 feet, then enable writes, right? So that is part of how some people are asking to solve that problem. And on the analytics side, the important thing to understand is there's a couple of different solves there, right? If we're talking about inline, what I'll call horizontal process-based, right, analytics. As an example, noise reduction for alarming. We have that on the server side. So as a data stream comes in, right, we have, on our side, we actually have analytic products that help us do this. We have an analytic running on the server that brings in the noise, reduces the noise, and only sends up the resulting alarms, as an example, so you get less, right, and only the important ones. The other piece is, especially when you get into equipment-based, verticalized analytics, is, again, in our case, we actually have some capability that can run right at the equipment where you could plug in some physics-based analytics and do analytics at the edge. So you can drive new insights at the edge, only push up the important stuff, and also save some of your bandwidth in the process. So at least for our purposes, that's how it runs.
Just one comment around the analytics is building it is one thing, sustaining it is another. And there has to be an ongoing commitment to the resources to sustain the business rules and logic and everything that's applied within the analytic engine. I mean, I'm presenting something and the person that developed the analytics or the business rules has now transferred off. I'm 2 or 3 life cycles of engineers, and this reading, this number that comes up becomes institutionalized. You got to keep it evergreen because you can, your business can change and everything unless everybody is absolutely aware of what they're being presented and what it represents, such that, through a rigorous management of change process, those analytics get impacted. And I feel too often is that people build these big analytic engines, the PhDs that develop the LP, they move off, they're gone. A year goes by, we go through a turnaround life cycle, we make changes in the units, and the constraints change, and everybody's still operating out of the same numbers.
Okay. I want to give Andreas a chance here because I know he's got something to say, and this will have to be the last word.
Okay, I keep it short. BASF, we do not allow to operate because our facilities are manned 24 hours. And of course, by mobile device, you can get advices, help to solve an issue. But when it comes to rectify it by operation, people are in the plant and can do it there. And therefore, we do not allow remote operation.
Okay, very good. Well, that's the end of our session for today, so please join me in thanking our panelists and presenters.